James chapter 1, what James will do is he's going to introduce all the themes he's going to talk about in this book, and then he's going to introduce it all in the very beginning, and then he'll bring it back later towards the end. So he intertwines it. Does that make sense? So James chapter 1 is the most important chapter because this is him setting the ground for everything that he's writing for. It's not random. There's a structure to this all. As I mentioned, verse 12 is the thesis. I'm trying to make sure all of these themes are going to get you to the point that you will remain steadfast under trial and stand approved by God in the very end. That's the point. All right, so James chapter 1, he talks about the testing of our faith, right? If you notice, he already repeated that multiple times. That's the first theme he introduces. He will come back to this in James chapter 2. He's going to come back to this theme of testing your faith in James chapter 2, verses 14 through 26. In James chapter 2, verses 14 through 26, this is where he talks about faith without works is dead. You guys know that famous passage, right? Faith without works is dead is a comment. He's going back to this concept of testing. The way you know your faith is alive, the way you know that you actually have true faith is that your faith is a living faith. And the living faith is primarily characterized by good works. You're not saved by works, but you are saved for good works, right? The works is the sign that you are alive, that your faith is alive. Meaning faith is not just dead head knowledge. Faith, according to James, is a living faith that circulates oxygen in you, and oxygen in this analogy is good works. You will just be overflowing with good works, which goes back to testing your faith. How do you know you have faith? Do you have works? Is it alive? Or is your faith just head knowledge? James chapter 1, verse 5, he introduces the second theme. This is where he talks about wisdom, asking God for wisdom to endure trials. He will revisit this theme in James chapter 3, verses 13 through 18. These are all the different adjectives in the Greek to describe divine wisdom. Now, you don't have to read Greek, but do you notice a pattern? Every single word starts with what letter? E. You know why James is doing that? He's trying to show the unity that comes from God's divine wisdom. And if you look at all the Greek words that he uses to describe the worldly wisdom, they're all different letters. See, James is like an artist here. He's saying, this is the wisdom from the world. It's chaotic, it's disunified, it creates chaos in your life. It's just going to cause more and more disorder in your life. But here's the wisdom from God. It's orderly, it's unified. And he literally pictures it with the words that he uses. That concept of wisdom goes back to the wisdom that he first introduced in James chapter 1, verse 5. He says, if any of you are going through trials, ask God for wisdom. What is this wisdom? In James chapter 3, it's orderly, it's unified, it brings peace, righteousness in your life. If your quote-unquote wisdom is causing more divisions and fights, that's not God's wisdom. How do you know you're living by God's wisdom? You're a person of peace and righteousness, right? Look at all the adjectives he uses there, right? So that's the second theme. James chapter 1, verse 5, there's a third theme here that gets revisited in James chapter 2, verses 1 through 9. So it says, ask God for wisdom, right? But do you notice in verse 5, he says, without what? Doubting, right? Doubting literally is the word judgment. It doesn't mean to question. It means that you're making distinctions. And we're going to get more into this next week. But he's going to comment on this theme in James chapter 2, verses 1 through 9, when he talks about people who show favoritism with other people. Because what are you doing when you show favoritism with people? When you are honoring some and dishonoring others, you are making distinctions. That concept of favoritism, making distinctions, is the same word for doubt. Because when you are praying with doubt, what you're doing is you're making distinctions with God of when you should pray to him and when you don't need to pray to him. When he can answer prayer and when you don't think he can answer. That's the doubting person in James chapter 1, verse 5. It's not like, it's really hard for me to believe. That's not, God doesn't condemn that kind of doubting. You know what he condemns? When you're saying, oh, I don't need to pray to God for this. I got this. Oh, this is a God problem. I should go to him for this. Oh, this is not a God problem, right? And this is why he describes it as like the waves going back and forth. You are determining when God can help you and should help you. That same attitude is also seen in how you treat people. You are determining which people you should like and honor and which you should dishonor. And that's a big, big sin to James when you show favoritism. And we'll go about that. So that's the third theme. The fourth theme is James chapter 1, verse 9. This is where he's going to introduce the concept of money now. The poor versus the rich. And he's going to talk about how the poor or the lowly are the ones that God exalts, while God is going to humble those who are the high and rich, right? It's like the reversal of the material status that's going on at this time. In James chapter 4, he's going to revisit this theme again in verse 6 and 10. When he pronounces judgment on the rich, the rich who are exploiting their workers by not paying them or not paying them rightly. So this concept of money is going to be introduced in James chapter 1, verse 9. And again, he doesn't say a single good word to rich people, by the way, in this letter. You're not going to find it. Just FYI. Now, I think he personally has a little vendetta against rich people a little bit because guess what? He wasn't rich. And he has seen how poor people were treated during this time. He saw how his brothers treated, and they are treated with no honor and respect, which goes with the idea of favoritism, because you know what's the analogy he uses about favoritism? You see a rich person come into your gathering, like, oh, you come sit here. And you see a dirty poor person, like, oh, you stay back there. You don't think he's seen that? Oh, rich person, Mark Cuban, right here. Mark Cuban, let's have lunch. And if a minimum wage worker from Dickies comes in, he's not going to be given the offering. Why do we need to? That's what he's talking about. You don't think that's personal to James? He's seen it. And that's the theme he talks about, money. Which, by the way, is the number one topic Jesus talked about. More than heaven and hell combined, you know what Jesus talked about the most? Money. You know why? Because that's the only idol that Jesus elevated to the same level of God. You remember what Jesus said? You cannot serve God and sex. Did he ever say that? Did he ever say you cannot serve God and TV and Netflix? You cannot serve God and good works? No. What did he say? You cannot serve God and what? Money. Has human nature changed that much, by the way? What's the number one idol? Money. Which is why that's a big theme in this one. Fifth theme. Again, each of these themes he introduces, and then he kind of weaves them back and forth throughout. The next theme is James chapter 1, verse 12, which is the thesis, as I mentioned. And this is about being steadfast until the end so that you will, stand approved with the crown of life. Well, he's going to repeat this, as I mentioned back again in James chapter 5, verse 7 through 11. He's going to come back to this concept when he closes out this book. And then the sixth theme is where he gets more practical in James chapter 1, verse 13. He talks about your tongue, how you speak. Be slow to speak, quick to hear, and slow to anger. He's going to bring out this theme 2 times again in James chapter 4, verse 1 through 5, when he talks about the reason why people fight is because of pride and arrogance. James chapter 3, when he talks about controlling your tongue, right? So twice he touches upon this concept of the tongue. The next theme, James chapter 1, verse 27. He talks about widows and orphans. The pure religion is caring for widows and orphans, the marginalized. He's going to comment on that in James chapter 2 again, verses 3 through 7 and 15. And then finally, he closes out James chapter 1, verses 22 to 25, when he talks about being doers of the word, not just hearers. And he's going to repeat that again in James chapter 2, verses 8 through 13, when he talks about fulfilling the law of God. Being doers of the word means to fulfill the royal law. Now, how does all of these random things you might see, how are they all connected together? This is how James defines wisdom. Because what is the book of James that I mentioned? It's the Proverbs of the New Testament. It's wisdom literature. This is different than the letters of Paul, the letters of John. This is not meant to speak about certain commandments to a certain church at a time. Because keep in mind the audience, they're not in one church. They've spread all over. The tribe has spread all over the Roman Empire. They're all suffering, being persecuted. He's saying what you need more than anything is not your money again. You don't need your property again. You don't need your community again. What you need more than anything is wisdom. And what does it mean to be wise, James? Here are the 8 themes. Here are the 8 themes of what it looks like. If you weave this all together, this is a picture of God's wisdom. How do you know you're a wise person? Do you endure during trials? How do you know you're a wise person? Do you control your tongue? How do you know you're a wise person? Do you show partiality or not to different people? How do you know you're a wise person? Do you care for the widows and orphans? How do you know you're a wise person? Do you not just hear, but do you do the word of God? Right? Do you see how every single area he's covered? How do you know you're a wise person? Do you plan your time without considering God, or do you understand that God is sovereign over your time by saying, if the Lord wills? He talks about your time. He talks about your money. He talks about your relationship. He talks about fights. He talks about every area you could think of because he's trying to show you how comprehensive God's wisdom is. But why do you need God's wisdom, though? It's not just so you can have a better life right now. It's so that you can stand approved in eternity in the end. I think a lot of times we miss the whole point of why God wants us to have wisdom. Wisdom is not a way for us to navigate through life. Wisdom is for the purpose so that we don't give up on God until the end. According to James. Remember the thesis? He's not talking about how do I get through the next 5 years until my kids go to college. He's talking about how do you make sure you don't give up on God and Jesus until you die so that you can stand with the crown of life approved. That's why you need wisdom.